Hello and welcome back to Let's Talk More on Monday. I am your podcast host, Chloe, and I am joined again by Vicky of Rooted Therapy and Wellness. So excited to have you back. We are going to be doing a little chat today about the love languages and what those mean, how they play a role in our relationships. And over on our Patreon, we're going to do a bit more of a deep dive about how those love languages can help us understand what we need and advice for how we can use them in relationships. So thank you so much for joining me again, Vicky.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
So let's give the audience a little bit of a reminder about you and what you do, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so my name is Vicky. I am a therapist and the owner of Rooted Therapy and Wellness here in Indianapolis. I see clients in Ohio and Indiana, and I specialize in sex and relationship therapy.
Yeah, which is why we were so excited to have you join us for these talks about love and relationships. I just think it's a really perfect match. So let's get into it. Talking about the love languages, in case people are unfamiliar with the whole concept itself, I wanted to first just go through the love languages and what they are. There are 5. Is that right? That people generally target as like, these are the love languages.
Yep. So the 5 love languages are based on a guy called Gary Chapman's work, really based on his book that came out in 1992, I think. And the 5 love languages are quality time, acts of service, gifts, words of affirmation, and physical touch. And the idea is that, you can go online, you can take the quiz, or sometimes folks can even identify for themselves. But it really just goes into, okay, like what it rates them typically. So you're typically going to have, you might have, it'll rank them like 1 through 5 for you, but it may be that like some of them have like 0. There may be some that you don't connect with at all. But doing the quiz online is going to help you kind of identify, okay, what are my major love languages? What is meaningful for me to like receive love?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that some of them you just may not connect with at all. They just don't resonate with you. They don't make you feel any kind of love, or when you do them for other people, there's no connection there. And then some you can just identify with way, way more. Like, this is the end all be all for me. This is what I expect out of every relationship. So
Yeah.
It's interesting how versatile they are.
Oh, 100%. And how they can change.
Yeah. Like, I feel like what I would have considered my number 1 love language in high school is totally different than what it is now a decade later.
Yeah.
Like, as your priorities change.
Right. And I think that's something that's so important to remember about the love languages. I think when they're brought up initially, some folks will then just accept them about their partner and be like, that's yours, right? Sometimes it's not an active conversation of like a check-in of like, hey, by the way, like, is that even still your love language? Or like, have you even like done the quiz again? Or is this still meaningful to you? Because sometimes just with any of those like quizzes and things like that, we can just kind of make assumptions and be like, oh, well, your gifts. So why are my gifts falling flat with you? Like, I've given you so many gifts. And I think that can be so hard is when there's not like active communication around them. And then maybe, I might be exhausting myself, like trying to get you a bunch of gifts and trying to show you that I care. And it's just not resonating.
Yeah.
And so that can be kind of sometimes the flaw that comes along with them.
Right. I mean, people forget that when you're with somebody for a long time, people change. That it's inevitable that they decide new things, they learn things about themselves, and I love that it's important to do like a temperature check.
Yes. No, for sure. Because they can kind of change. And I think I really see them change based on like time of life. Sometimes even just like what we tend to see is like new moms, physical touch starts to go dramatically down because they're being touched at all the time. Or maybe we're maybe in like a job, right? Like maybe there's different job kind of demands in us that we're maybe really trying to overexert ourselves in one of those languages.
Yeah.
And then we might be like, okay, well, that's actually not how I connect with my people outside of that anymore. So yeah, I think keeping a pulse on them and kind of communicating around them too. I don't want to keep, I keep going to the example of gifts, but I don't want to just keep like bombarding the people in my life with gifts and not kind of doing the why of it,
Right.
or like communicating around it. Not that I need to be like, I bought you this gift because I love you, right? Like, I want you to feel loved, but just being like, some communication of like, hey, like, I saw this, I thought it'd be, I thought of you and I really wanted to get it to you, like some of that. Cause I think sometimes and I see it sometimes with the relationships I work with where there's been no talking around it. And then someone comes in, they're like, I feel really disconnected. And the other person's like, but why? I've been doing all the housework for you. And it's like, hey, there's just been no communication around it. And then some of it, we haven't gotten like the why of this behavior, which is what we want with love languages. Like all of them are about love, right? It's not just about each individual one. It's like how we kind of show love to people.
Yeah. And I saw this video recently. I feel like it went pretty viral. I don't know if it was TikTok or Instagram where it really got passed around, but it was this couple who went to Target together to make each other Valentine's Day baskets. And on the surface, you're like, what a cute idea. I love that. But it's from her perspective, and she goes around picking out like all these really thoughtful gifts and putting together a really, really nice basket. And then the next part of the video is her opening hers from him. And you can just tell that there's a disconnect because it's like some of the same stuff that she picked out for him that he picked out for her, and there's a pregnancy test in there, and like on the surface, like when I saw it I was like, ew, you better not get me a pregnancy test, but like, maybe for them it's a good thing because they're trying, and that would be like a sweet, thoughtful gesture. Impossible to say from the outside, but as long as you're doing those check-ins with your partner and you know what they want, what they need, what would be actually an impactful gift, then that would be great. But if you're just like dropping hints that you want a new baby, maybe that's not the best way to go about it.
No, absolutely. I think that's where it's like communication just helps us get the backdrop, right? And like you said, it's like we can look at that thing and there's two different meanings, multiple meanings we could take from it. And communication is going to be the thing that actually gets the point across, or we're going to get offended.
Hopefully she saw it and she was like, "Aw, thank you."
Yeah, and I even think within, we don't want to I think we can make assumptions about people's love languages. Like I remember kind of similarly to yourself, I'm like on scrolling through my own Instagram of like my therapy page, and I come across this, what to get someone if they're acts of service. And I'm acts of service. And one of them was a Roomba. Now, there's acts of service people out there who may have been like, yes, a Roomba. I would not be one of those people. I would be like, this is not a gift. This can be part of our like budgeting for like household items, but if I'm opening up a Roomba Christmas morning, my birthday, something like that, I'm probably going to be like, this maybe doesn't help me feel loved. So even just kind of when we do find out our partner's love language, maybe even challenging some of the assumptions we have about that, or even our friends, right? I think it's important to know the people around us, what their love languages are. I think it's really important. But just being careful that we're not making too many assumptions when it comes to what their love language is. And then, of course, they must want this thing.
Right. This is just telling me that you don't want to sweep.
I'm like, man, no, I'm not unwrapping that. Like,
imagine it's like a Mother's Day present and you're like, okay.
Yes, right. I think, and it was, I know this is probably like a while ago, but there was like I think it was Kristen Wiig was on SNL, and there was like a skit of like mom on Christmas morning.
And I got a robe.
Yes! And when you were kind of throwing this, when we were talking about this and I was thinking about the love languages and I thought about assumptions, that skit immediately came to mind. And I would like encourage people to look it up because I think moms connected with it because they're like, this is such a like practical or like it doesn't connect with me kind of gift. And it kind of showed like, hey, prefaces kind of like, or the kind of backdrop story is like, she's probably been thoughtful with all these kids and this is what she ended up getting.
Right. Unless she specifically asked for a robe, like,
yes,
you gotta find out what she actually needs and what would make her feel like you showed up.
Right. And for gifts person, like if gifts are your love language and that's maybe what you got, that would be really discouraging. Whereas if you really maybe don't care about gifts, that's just like, hey, that's totally fine. Like I'm either here for stuff that's going to happen during the day or what you've said to me or how thankful you maybe were for your gifts. But if gifts are your love language, that robe might have stung.
Right. Or maybe, you thought it was great and now you would rather see somebody help clean up all the wrapping that's on the floor because doing it yourself is exhausting.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So love languages, we've talked about how versatile they are and how, they can play a really interesting role in relationships and how you have to check in with your person and make sure that it's still relevant and, how to even approach it. But I feel like we have talked about it, obviously they apply to a romantic relationship and we've talked about it with like your family, like, you're getting your mom gifts, but I feel like they can apply to all kinds of relationships, even friendships or new relationships that you may be fostering. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, I really encourage, my folks who like love languages really resonate with them. I've encouraged them to engage in maybe like self-care that also reflects their love language.
Oh, I didn't even think about that angle.
Yeah. So what I do is like I said, acts of service is like my number one. So it used to be that I used to love, but in the morning I could set, or the night before I would set my coffee pot to go off, like to start making coffee at the exact time in which I would get up. And that was like a little acts of service gesture to future me that
Yeah.
I could just get up and my coffee would be there. Right. So I like encourage folks, whatever that is, if it's, let's say it's physical touch, do we want to go out and get like really nice blankets and like different things? Or I think, squishmallows, or like everyone's getting squishmallows. Do you want to get a squishmallow? Right. So whenever you think about your own love languages, I always tell people like, it shouldn't be based on other people that we should feel loved, and kind of looking towards even self-care and saying like, okay, like if these are your love languages, what are even some gifts that you can kind of give yourself based on what your love languages are, and how can we remain cognizant of them in self-care? So I kind of have them look at it like that. And then I do have them kind of like look towards their friendships, like you said. And I think it's even, and talk about it. I think, one thing Brene Brown talks about how we want to know other people and be known in return, right? Me too, Brene fan. So it's like, tell your friends, have that conversation, because there is something that's just like top notch whenever someone says, hey, like, I know this is your love language and, here it is, or, whatever that is, or I'm trying to be, cognizant of your love language right now. Those mean a lot, and not just relying upon those for like romantic relationships. Like they can totally be a part of your friendship groups.
Yeah. And I think it's like you said about the self-care thing, it's almost a way to just check in with yourself and analyze what you want and what you need from yourself, from the people in your life. And I love like those self-analyzing tools. I think it's so important to continue to do that with yourself as you grow and you change. Just, finding out who you are and what you need. And obviously those things can morph and change, but there's this phrase that has kind of become popular on the internet where it's like the mortifying ordeal of being known, of being perceived. But what you said about Brene is like, yes, it is a little bit mortifying to be perceived and for people to know you in such an intimate way, but it's really important once you kind of jump over that hurdle of like, oh no, people see me, people know me, to then like lean into it and allow people to, and yourself to foster those needs and those feelings.
Yeah, 100%. And when I was doing I do emotion focused therapy with my relationships. And we can probably reference that, I'm sure, in like the dig deeper on kind of how that connects.
Yeah.
But with that, they opened up the training and they goes, look, here's the deal. When there's breakdowns in relationships, it really comes down to this core question of, do you feel like you're on the heart and mind of your partner? And if you can answer confidently, like, yeah, like you've probably got a good relationship. And if that's a question mark, or if it's a, I don't know, hey, there's probably work to do. And I think like those love languages can just be helpful as a way of communicating to, partner people in our lives of like, hey, you are on my heart and mind, and that intentionality of it.
Yeah. Intentions are so important.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Make
100%.
people feel so like valued.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that was a really good overview of what the love languages are and what that they can mean in our lives, how we can utilize them.
Mhm.
So I would love to give you an opportunity to plug anything that you want our readers to know about, and then we will go ahead and sign off. But like we said, join us on Patreon for a deeper dive into the love languages and how they can help us and structure our thinking around our relationships.
Mhm. Yeah, and just folks can find me just on Instagram, Rooted Therapy and Wellness. And I try to be as active as I can on there, but that'll kind of be a link to my website, a link to just different things that I'm putting out there.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Vicki, and thank you guys for listening to this episode of Let's Talk More on Monday, talking about our love languages. And we will see you over on Patreon. Thanks for listening.